Hello, welcome to another in this series of Windows on Advent. Today is day 4 of our series, and we'll be picking up scriptures from the book of Genesis, number of chapters 26, 28, 35, 48 and 49. So far we have looked at how the story has progressed from the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, where the serpent has been cursed by God, and God has said there will be enmity between the offspring or the seed of the serpent and the offspring or the seed of the woman, and eventually the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent, and the serpent is a picture of Satan. And so far, obviously, the seed of the woman in the story of Adam is the whole, anyone from mankind, from humankind itself. But it begins to focus down as the story proceeds, and God takes a wandering Aramaean, as he's called, Abram, and God says that this blessing is going to come through the offspring of Abram. And yesterday we saw how Abram was an old man, and this child was not born until Abraham was 100 and his wife was 90. So it was a miracle birth. But what we also found was that Abraham had tried to run ahead of God, and some years before that, perhaps about 13 years I think before that, he had had another son, this time by the servant of his wife. It was his wife's suggestion that he take Hagar as a sort of a surrogate wife, if you like, and he had another child earlier on by Hagar, and this child's name is Ishmael. So we have two sons. We have Isaac, who is the promised seed, the offspring that God always intended the blessing to come down through, ultimately the father of the Jewish nation, and then we have Ishmael, who becomes the father of the Arab nations. So Abraham is both the father of the Jewish nation and the Arab nations. And God has said that through Abraham, all nations will be blessed. But of course, he wasn't even a nation at that point. And God is clear that the blessing will come through Isaac, not through Ishmael, not through Ishmael at all. In Genesis 21 verse 7, it is through Isaac your offspring will be reckoned, says God. So today we move on and we see how this story continues to refine. There are ever decreasing circles within this story. We started quite broad, the whole of humanity, and it starts to come down to one man and one nation, and then it's going to become certain branches of that family from which the Messiah will ultimately come. And the blessing comes through Isaac, Abraham's son. Remember in Genesis 22, God says to Abraham, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and sacrifice him to me. Now, Isaac has been a miracle birth, and God speaks to Isaac later in his life and says, I will bless you and increase the number of your descendants. This is Genesis 26, for the sake of my servant Abraham. So he's going to be blessed for the sake of Abraham, the father of faith, father of the Jewish nation. It almost sounds as though God isn't terribly impressed with Isaac, but who am I to pass comment on that? He never seems quite as prominent in the narrative, the biblical narrative, after Genesis 22, when he's about to be offered up on the altar. And Sarah seems to disappear from the story altogether till she dies several chapters later. So it's interesting, isn't it? But Abraham is true to God and offers to sacrifice his child, and God says that's enough. And a lamb or a ram is sacrificed instead. And Isaac marries, after the death of his mother, Isaac marries at the age of 40, marries a woman called Rebecca. She is a relative of his cousin, and they're married for 20 years before she has any children. So the birth of Isaac was completely impossible in human terms, born to a 90-year-old woman. And now they have to wait 20 years. God doesn't do anything simply. God doesn't do anything in the normal way, does he, with bringing this offspring, this seed who will crush the serpent into the world, bringing this offspring into the world. And as Rebecca is pregnant, she cries out, "What is happening to me?" And she is giving birth to twins. I think they're the first twins mentioned in the Bible. I've got my twins here. I'll just bring them into focus a little tiny bit. So there they are. Come on, boys. So there's our twins today. And over here we've got Jacob. He's very smooth. And we've got hairy Esau rather. And she gives birth to twins. And she says, "What is happening to me?" And she's told by God that she has two nations inside her womb. Now that is a scary thought, two nations, but she has, because Jacob is going to become the ongoing father of the Jewish nation, whereas Esau will become the father of the Edomites. Now, there's very little beef between them in terms of being born, but Jacob is the younger of the two. And so you would expect the line of descent, you would expect this promise to pass through Esau, wouldn't you? But God does it differently once again. These two brothers don't really get on. One's a mummy's boy, one's a daddy's boy. And the mummy's boy, Jacob, who is named for tricky or the deceiver, or grasps the heel as he comes out the womb, grabbing hold of his brother's heel. He manages to get the birthright off his brother for a mess of pottage, for a soup. His brother comes in from the field, he's starving, and he sells his birthright as the firstborn, the right of primogeniture, to his younger brother, Jacob. And that is interesting. He also has to steal the blessing. So in his old age, Isaac wants to bless his older son. He wants to bless Esau, the one that he really loves. And there's a tricky business between Jacob and his mother Rebecca, and they put animal skins on to make him seem as though he's hairy. And Isaac gives a wonderful, fulsome blessing because he's blind and he's partly blind, and he blesses the wrong son. And so the birthright and the blessing pass to the younger son. And Esau doesn't like this, and there's going to be all kinds of trouble at home. So Jacob is told to leave home, and he goes off, and he's sent off to the relatives, which are in Paddan Aram. And on the way, he stops, and he stops in a place called Haran, and he sleeps for the night out there. Puts one of the stones. He's outside. Puts a stone under his head for a pillow. And he has a dream of a stairway a stairway resting on earth, with its top reaching to heaven, angels of God ascending and descending on it. And there above it stands the Lord. And the Lord says, "I'm the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring." So there's the promise going again from God. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. And God promises to go with him. And Isaac says, "Well, if that happens, you can be my God, and I'll give you a tenth of everything." At this point, he moves on. He ends up marrying two sisters. There's more deceit going on there, but he marries Leah, who is unloved, and he marries Rachel, whom he loves very, very much. And as he leaves his father-in-law Laban, another trickster, he is going to meet Esau after all these years. He's terribly fearful that Esau will kill him, and he spends the night alone, sends on the families ahead. This is Genesis 32, and he's got all these gifts ready for him. And that night Jacob got up and took his two wives. He sends them across the ford Jabbok. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you've struggled with God and with men and have overcome." And Jacob asks for the name of his opponent. The opponent says, "Why do you ask my name?" So he's wrestling with God, and his name is changed from Jacob the deceiver to Israel, the one who wrestles with God. So the blessing has passed down through Abraham to Isaac, the only son, to Jacob, the younger son. And Jacob has 12 sons. He has these two wives, Leah and Rachel, and also he has children through their servants, who become his concubines. And God opens the womb of Leah, the unloved one, and she gives birth to a number of children. Finally, God miraculously opens the womb of Rachel, the loved one, and she gives birth to Joseph, the one he loves best of all. And there's a long story, marvelous story at the end of Genesis about how Joseph is taken into Egypt and becomes the saviour of the known world. He's a type again of Christ. So we expect the blessing and the promised seed of the woman to pass to Joseph because he's the loved son. But it doesn't. It doesn't. Once again, God does something strange. For example, in Genesis chapter 48, Jacob is getting old, and he asks Joseph to bring his two sons before him, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Manasseh is the elder of the two, so he's going to put his right hand on the elder boy, but he swaps his hands and he blesses the younger one, Ephraim. And Joseph says, "Don't do that, don't do that." But he says, "Yes, that's how it's going to be. The younger one, Ephraim, is going to be fruitful. He's going to be the one who's really going to be blessed," because Ephraim meant fruitful. And when we come to chapter 49 of Genesis, we find on his deathbed that Jacob is passing blessing on all of his 12 sons. And we come to the blessing on Joseph. Joseph is a fruitful vine. There's that Ephraim word again. A fruitful vine near a spring whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility. That's his story as a child, as a young man. But his bow remained steady, his strong arm stayed supple, because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lie below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. So we at this point we're saying, right, this blessing is passing to the offspring of Jacob. The one who is going to come and crush Satan will be from the line of Joseph. But that isn't going to be the way that it is. Despite the fact that one of his children is called Ephraim, and Ephraim later becomes a name for Israel, just as Jacob's name had become Israel, the nation of Israel, and Ephraim becomes another name for the nation of Israel. The blessing is not going to come the way man or woman would expect it to come. God never does things as we would expect him to do. And we're going to find that this line of blessing diverts again. It's gone through Abraham, Isaac, to Jacob. We expect it to go through the line of Joseph, but it doesn't. And so we'll see tomorrow which of his sons it goes through. And until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you, and give you peace at this Advent season.